Hi, my name's Johnny, and today we are back here at the beautiful, the wonderful Bass Brothers. Let's call it them.
Bass Brother.
Here at Bass Bros in Leamington Spa in England, once again to give you a special look at some basses that we definitely haven't covered on this channel before, because we're taking a trip back in time. I'm joined by the wonderful Matt Parker. If you haven't done so already, make sure you click the link in the description where you can go and subscribe to Matt's amazing channel, who mainly focuses at the moment on a lot of vintage gear. And hence why you're here today, to share some of your expertise along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Recently, I've just seemed to find myself in this kind of vintage rabbit hole where I keep getting sent really, really stunning old basses, and I've really enjoyed kind of deep diving the spec and how they kind of changed modern music as we know it.
Yeah. And so today we are going to be looking at and focusing on the realm of the 60s. What basses were most prominent and what impact they had on modern music today. And we're going to start things off, of course, as you might expect almost, with one of the wonderful basses that you've got in your hands right now. Matt, tell us all about this precision bass.
Absolutely. So this is an absolutely stunning example of a 1963 Fender Precision bass. Now, as some of you may know, the Fender Precision bass went through a few iterations before we get to the P bass that we know it as today. And this is a kind of I guess a later example of the breed. It's kind of one of the early ones in the setup which we would know it in. But from 57 onwards, it kind of cements its spec, and that's kind of where it stayed moving forward. So this features a couple of kind of key changes from a very early P bass. By this point, we've moved over to, not that you can see it because it's under a guard, but we've moved over to that split single coil pickup that we know and love. And also we've started to get to the rosewood fingerboard at this point as well, which was not an option on the earlier P basses. It features a very wide 44.5mm nut width, and then is mated to quite a shallow front to back, kind of C-shaped neck, which is really comfortable. A lot of people think that these kind of early 60s and onwards P basses have a bit more of a baseball back neck, but actually by the time we've kind of got to 57 and onwards, they've lost that really round front to back profile and have actually become a lot shallower, but have retained a really wide nut width.
There's almost a reason why this P bass is the one that kind of stood the test of time, because it's like the 51, 54 style P bass had a few quirks that then they refined and, you know, fixed along the way.
Absolutely. And we lose some of the foibles of those earlier precision type basses as well, in the fact that they had like single coil pickups, which were quite prone to kind of electrical interference, 60 cycle hum. So if you had your hand off the strings, you'd get some buzzing, and they were actually a little bit hotter as well. So you kind of didn't have as much kind of low, mid and low end, but you had quite a hot attack, which was, it sounds great, but certainly isn't as versatile, I would say, as the split pickup, which they then moved to. So taking a look at the rest of the bass, we can see that this particular example features the absolutely stunning clay dot markers. This is something that I absolutely love on the kind of like pre-CBS era Fenders. I think it looks so classy. It looks awesome. And you can see that by this point, we've also moved to the veneer rosewood fingerboard as well. So for those of you who don't know what that is, Fender moved away from kind of maple fingerboards and started doing a veneer rosewood fingerboard with a curve to it, a radius, rather than kind of the flatter slab board that we may have seen in earlier examples. This bass also features its original 3-ply celluloid pickguard. So again, a really nice vintage original feature. And the eagle-eyed amongst you will have noticed as well that this has the tug bar in this position. So by the mid 70s, this had actually come up to here and people were starting to use it as a thumb rest. But during the early renditions of this particular accessory, Leo Fender thought that this would be used by players to rest your fingers on and then use the thumb to pluck, which is why it's called, affectionately known as the tug bar. But again, by the kind of mid 70s, we've seen this move up and people were starting to actually use it as a thumb rest. So the rest of the bass is very typical of what you'd expect of a P bass. Underneath this lovely little cover, we've got a split coil P bass pickup, and then we've got a simple volume and tone control as we would come to know. This particular example also features the kind of knurled or ridged barrel saddles. This is before they moved over to those kind of like single groove units by kind of the late 60s. And it means you can actually adjust the string spacing by like moving the strings over to the grooves as well. Taking a look at the back of the body, we can see that this is an older example and features a 4-bolt on neck construction as we would typically expect from a P bass. And this particular example has a really, really gorgeous flamed maple neck as well, which looks honestly bananas.
This is mad. So nicely worn in as well. Like, it's beautiful.
Absolutely stunning. And it's worth noting at this point as well that Fender was still using nitro to finish their basses at this point. So it certainly wears really nicely. You kind of see all of that gorgeous play wear that you come to expect from an instrument of this age. And it just sounds absolutely glorious as well. It's certainly, I think there's something, I don't necessarily think the nitro affects the tone, but it definitely gives the instrument more character, I would say. Like, you know, you can really tell when someone's loved playing something. And in terms of neck finishes as well, it definitely does change the feel slightly in comparison with poly, I would say, where you kind of start to feel some of the gloss taken away and it becomes a little bit less sticky and stuff like that. So yeah, really quite a big fan of this bass. And also I think it's worth noting as well, on the back of the headstock here, we can see that what we've got affectionately referred to as the hootenanny button. So originally, this could have been an additional place for you to put a strap for country singers. So they would have had this strap up here. And yeah, that's why that's there.
Wow. I think you should don that today, you know?
Should have put the hooten on it.
Yeah,
on.
for sure.
Yeah, straw hat.
Are you even a vintage fan if you're not using that, you know?
Yeah, like exactly right. But yeah, it's a killer bass. The one thing that I really love about these 60s Fenders as well is that the alder that they were using is really lightweight. So as soon as I picked this up, I commented like, wow, it's so light.
Yeah.
And it's the same as the jazz basses. They're just so much lighter.
A lot of vintage basses you automatically assume are going to weigh an absolute ton. But this one, and you know, your vintage jazz bass that you've got as well, I picked them up, bracing myself, and I was like, oh, actually, it's not too bad.
Absolutely right. And I think we've talked about this off camera, but I am sure some of that is down to the fact that the wood stocks that they had at the time were kind of like really old growth wood, and it was also aged for a lot longer. Obviously, like the manufacturing process these days is kind of super sped up, and like the wood that we get these days hasn't had the same level of aging as the wood that would have been available to Fender during these years. And I think that does play a huge part in not only the feel, but also the kind of resonance of the instruments. I know people say that kind of, you know, 50s, 60s are like golden era Fenders. And I truly do believe that some of that is down to the wood choices that they had available to them at that point.
Yeah, there is just a vibe you get. And it's almost like if you heard them side by side in like, you know, in a demo, you might not hear the difference, but when you're playing it, you feel it and you know it when you're playing it, it transcends through your fingers. I swear to God. Like,
absolutely. I think as well, because you're interfacing with the instrument with your hands, it does make you play in a certain way. You kind of almost feel like, for me at least, I almost feel like the heritage of other people having played it, and it gives you different sensibilities. Like for a start, you're aware of the value, you're aware of the fact it's almost like a historic artifact at this point, and they're not making any more 60s P basses.
Yes.
You can get great replicas, obviously, from the custom shop and stuff, but it's not going to be original. And also, I think some of that, the spec is different to a modern bass in that they've usually got rounder radius fingerboards and things like that. So you do have to play with a bit more, I guess, thought and conviction, because they aren't as easy to play sometimes. So they make you more, for me, they make me think about my note choices a little bit more, because I think they've got a little bit of fight in them. You know, they've each got their own individual character, and I think that playing these instruments, you kind of play to the instrument rather than try and bend the instrument to your will.
And that's a great point when you say there's a reason why all these vintage instruments are all so different, I think. Not only from year to year, but in the same batch, you know, they're all going to be so different because of those woods and of the feeling that it gives you. And that I always recommend when you're trying something like this to absolutely go and try it for yourself first. And it's worth mentioning that all of the basses that you see here today are available up for grabs on the Bass Bros website. So click the link in the description. We'll leave the links if they're still available for these specific basses as well. You can actually book in to come and try them here in the showroom for yourself if you want to as well. So make sure you get in touch if you like anything you see on their site. Should we have a listen to this one?
Yeah, I think we should. So it's worth noting that this is strung with flats. I think they're TIs based on the silks, but I could be wrong. It plays great. It's very period correct. You'd expect these to have shipped with flats. And so it gives you a really good version, I think, of that kind of like quintessential 60s P bass tone you'd come to expect. Yeah. So I'll just do a little bit tone on, tone off, and then yeah, move on to the next thing, I guess.
Yeah, we're running this through the Line 6 HX Stomp, and we're just recording it into the Noble preamp on there, just to give it a little bit of saturation, and you're not hearing just totally clean, so you've got a little bit on there, but it's not colouring the tone, it's just tidying it up ever so slightly, and that'll be the same for all of what you hear today, and just recording direct from there. We're using this Ashdown amp in between us here just to monitor in the room, but you're hearing everything direct from the Stomp. Let's have a listen.
Cool.
Super smooth, not like, it's got loads of character and its warmth, I'd say. It has that over like brightness. People associate character with like this kind of unique top end that you're getting, but this one's actually just super warm and smooth sounding.
Yeah, and I think smooth is a great way of describing it. I think sometimes P basses can fall into that, I guess, trap of being a little bit nasal. Certainly with round, you get a bit of a kind of like a kind of top end in them, which I'm not a massive fan of. I think, to be fair, they sit really well in a mix, but this one, it definitely kind of has a smoother character to it. It's got less of that kind of like upper mid or like kind of just normal mids punch, and instead really embraces that kind of low, mid and bottom end without sounding too woolly either. I think it still retains its clarity, which is really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Should we move on to the jazz?
Yeah, I think so.
So now we're here with probably one of the most expensive basses in the shop. So yeah. I'm glad you're playing this one and not. Tell us all about this and really, the conception of the jazz bass, which is Fender's kind of next step.
Absolutely. So the jazz bass was introduced as the kind of deluxe offering in comparison with the P bass. So what we get is the introduction of 2 single coil pickups in the neck, although it's more like a middle position, and then the bridge position. Originally, when the jazz bass was introduced, it would have had a slightly different control layout. So it would have had 2 stacked controls with a volume and tone for each pickup individually. But by 1961, this had kind of been changed to the volume and tone control system, which we've come to know ever since. Now, this particular example is an absolutely stunning all original example of a 1964 jazz bass in custom color. So as we can see, this originally would have been in, I believe, Lake Placid blue, but as the top coat of nitro reacts with UV, it kind of darkens and becomes this almost greeny color.
Yeah.
It's absolutely gorgeous.
It's got Sherwood, isn't it?
It's almost like Sherwood, yeah. And it's got lovely, I don't know if you're seeing camera, but it's got a load of checking as that nitro kind of contracts and starts to crack, and it just looks absolutely gorgeous. Now, in comparison with the P bass, the jazz bass does have some key differences. Namely, and probably the one that most people feel immediately, is the much smaller 38mm nut width. Now, Leo Fender was originally thinking that this would be a bass that would suit jazz players, so he reduced the nut width size to make string spacing tighter at the nut so that people would be able to do more flowing lines. And this certainly comes across when you feel these necks. They definitely feel a lot kind of thinner at the nut, and also these 60s ones have quite a slim, shallow profile front to back in comparison with the later 70s ones. So these are well known as a very fast playing neck. They feel great. There's certainly, with that tighter string spacing at the nut, they do make it easier to play, I would say, faster lines in that first position. And the eagle-eyed amongst you will have noticed that this also has that laminate rosewood fingerboard we come to expect with these clay dot markers, which again, I think are just such a quintessential feature of that kind of pre-CBS era of Fender. As mentioned earlier, it also features the tug bar. Now this one features all original specs, so it's still got the ashtray trip covers. Again, these are in really nice condition, and it still features its 3-ply white, black, white pick guard as well. You'll notice, interestingly, that the headstock hasn't aged in the same way as the body. This is just due to the way that they did different top coats, because the water slide decals used to react to the top coat, so they don't age in the same way because they use a different thing. But this is a great bass. Again, because of the era of woods they were using, it's super lightweight for a jazz bass. It just doesn't really weigh anything. You know, some 70s jazz basses can be absolute boat anchors, but this one feels absolutely great.
I've never seen a bass this old in this good condition. It's got some marks on the back, but like the neck is wild. Like the gloss intact pretty much on that, like is crazy. So this one's been really, really well looked after as well, in particular.
Absolutely. You can tell this thing's been really cherished. As you rightly mentioned, there is some wear on the back, a couple of bits of like buckle rash and stuff. So someone has played it, but you can tell it's been someone's pride and joy. They've really loved this bass, and it plays great, sounds great as well. It's got a load of bottom end for a jazz bass. It's really glassy sounding as well. And it's just absolutely great. I think this is an absolutely brilliant bass.
Can we have a listen, please?
Yeah, absolutely. This particular bass is currently wearing round wound, so you're probably going to get a little bit more kind of like top end compared to the flats that we had on the P bass. And because you've got these two single coils as well, it certainly does give you a little bit more tonal variety. So there's a bit more tone on tap if you want to kind of get a bit hotter, you know, go to the bridge, dial back the neck a little bit, and you can kind of add a bit more bite to your tone.
I've never heard someone say wearing when it comes to strings.
Oh, really?
It's wearing rounds.
It's wearing rounds.
Nice.
Strung with rounds. Yeah. So there we go. What I'll do is I'll start on the neck with a tone on full, and we'll just have a little noodle, and then we'll move through the pickup positions as we go through them.
Noodle me up.
Cool. Sounds so fat. It's got such a big booty.
Massive. Big old booty on
Big old booty. Super loads of low end, really glassy, really kind of, I would say, a transparent sounding low end, not particularly woolly. Certainly in the room, you're getting like almost, I would say, quite a glassy bottom end. It's like really transparent sounding, sounds really nice. You're getting like a lot of, you're getting a lot of fundamental, but you're also getting that flavored with some different overtones as well, which I think is like a key signature move of the jazz bass. So this is both pickups on together.
I'm always like so torn between a P and a J, and every time it's when I go from a P, especially a vintage one, to a J, and I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah.
I mean, loads more top naturally, where the P bass is giving you so much mids. The jazz naturally with those pickups being spread apart, it gives you a scoop. I always think of it like a bridge. Like the two pickups, you've got the gap in between, whereas the middle P,
it's just a hump.
Like it's a hump.
Absolutely.
And yeah, it just sounds quintessentially fantastic. And like you say, pretty glassy for a vintage kind of jazz.
Absolutely, because, you know, as you'll know, pickups lose magnetism over time. So often what people like about vintage pickups is that they do lose a bit of output. So they kind of aren't as hot as a modern pickup. And so you kind of get a bit more, I would say, transparency, for lack of a better word. It kind of sounds more honest. It sounds kind of, you're not getting flavored with as much bite. So you're kind of getting more of the fundamental and what's going on around it, rather than that kind of hotness that you might get from a modern pickup. So
yeah.
I think it sounds great. Certainly with the both on together, it just sounds really nice, especially with tone on full. You know, you're getting so much sonic information. And, you know, one of the things that I'll say about the jazz bass as well is they're so reactive to fingerstyle. So when you buy in with a jazz, you get so much additional information. Like, you know, you can go that. You get that kind of extra that I don't think a P bass can always do. I think P basses are more well behaved.
Yeah, it cuts through in a different way almost, and they react totally different to amps, totally different to drive, things like that. Like, so they're really different beasts. So it's funny that Leo Fender was like, yes, this is the deluxe version of it, but actually created something wildly different.
Absolutely,
you know, in the process.
Absolutely. So should we go to the bridge?
Let's go to the bridge.
So this is a sound which not everyone loves. It's, I would say, for lack of a better word, a bit thinner sounding. You're getting less bottom end, but you're getting a lot more top and kind of overtones and stuff like that. It's definitely a lot brighter, a lot bitier. As a standalone, I'm not convinced that a bridge pickup with tonal full sits that well in the mix. But when you're soloing on a bass, it's almost like that's when the jazz bass is almost like a secret weapon. You roll the tone back and you kind of get like a really distinctive kind of like nasally cutting sound, but you're not getting massively abrasive top end. So like Jacko, for example, perfect example, bridge pickup, fingerstyle all the way back, tone rolled off so that you're getting like a lot of kind of like the initial attack cut out of it.
Honk without the quack.
Exactly right. Honk without the crack. So anyway, this is the bridge with the tone on full. I'll give you a quick thing, but.
I'm one of those people that doesn't love that sound, but that sounded perfectly usable to me. Sounded cool.
You know what? In the room, it's actually got a bit more bass response than I was expecting, because I'm playing a lot of 70s jazzes at the minute, and they're very bright and they're very barky.
Well, there is, you know, a big difference in pickup position
Absolutely.
between 70s and 60s. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing that we're not going to go too much into, because we are going to be doing more of these videos.
Absolutely.
Going through the different eras. So this is the 60s one, of course. So make sure you go and subscribe down below to then stay tuned for when we look at the 70s, 80s, and maybe beyond.
The last thing that I wanted to show off, which is almost like the party trick of the jazz bass, in my opinion, is that kind of bridge with the tone rolled off. And this is very quintessential in terms of what you would hear from kind of like players like Jacko and stuff like that. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to play like Jacko, but obviously, certainly with these covers, because they kind of do get in the way a little bit. So I'll be playing kind of in front of the ashtray rather than behind, just because, well, I don't know, we try.
It's loads of top, isn't it?
Yeah, it's weird. It's like, I was expecting it to darken up a little bit.
Yeah.
It's like mine definitely gets a bit darker than that.
Worth mentioning, we're not listening to this super loud in here, so we might be getting like string noise kind of getting in the way of that. Maybe it'd be interesting to hear this back. So let us know in the comments below what you think about these two Fender basses, and, you know, which ones that we prefer.
Yeah.
Should we have a look at another brand?
Yeah, let's do it.
So now we have swapped places, because I'm going to be demoing the kind of darker side of the 60s, literally, in terms of sound.
Yeah.
Because when I think 60s as well, you know, there's a particular band that seems to come up in a lot of people's favourites.
Slayer.
Slayer. Yeah, they absolutely dominated with this. That being the Beatles, of course. And when you think of the Beatles, of course, you think of Hofner. A lot of people refer to the violin bass as the Beatle bass, as, you know, Paul McCartney was the most well known for purchasing and playing one of these throughout, both at the start and at the end of the Beatles. Most people probably know the Hofner violin for the two pickups being further apart. The one I wanted to demo today is one slightly different, the 61, to talk about 1961, when Paul McCartney first got a Hofner from Hamburg in Germany. Mm-hmm. They, of course, modded it to fit his needs, being a left-handed player. Should we play it left-handed today?
Yeah.
Yeah. And he, gravitated towards that because of the symmetrical body, meaning it could be the same. But, they obviously just changed how the pickups were and how it was set out to fit his needs. He then went on to get a backup, which is the kind of more traditional one with the pickups slightly towards the bridge on here, or the treble side, as they like to call it. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, these just absolutely ooze quality and sound. This one is not an original 60s one, I'm afraid, but Bass Bros are dealers now in new Hofners. So this one is actually a B-stock one, but they have got some new ones in stock as well in all different styles. I bought the very thin ignition one from here,
which is very good.
Very good. That's what they should have called them. It's a better name, really. Just absolutely phenomenal. And I used to hate Hofners so much because I'd be like, oh, they're so ugly. But I love them now.
I love them as well. As you said, I think as you get older, you start to be like, these are actually cool. And I think as you kind of come away from like certain like aesthetics you're into or something, you can start to appreciate more things for what they are. And
100%.
And I think it's worth it's worth noting as well that although this is a modern instrument, in terms of spec, it's almost as close as you can get to an original. Like the bodywork is the same, like all the pickup positioning and stuff is the same. It's made in the same factories and, not by the same people, but probably their grandkids that made the first one. So, in terms of design, in terms of build, all the spec, it's very, very similar to what, you would have seen in the 60s.
That's right. And we've got a spruce, look at this, like flamey spruce body, which is maple.
So it's maple, it's flamed maple back and
sides.
And it's a select spruce top.
Spruce top. That's the one with the maple neck and rosewood fretboard, of course. And what I think is always unique about the Hofners as well is that they've got 0 frets.
Yeah.
Which is so ahead of its time.
Yeah.
And really, nowadays, I think of 0 frets and I think of like Sandberg, and it really gives you that even sound across all of the strings when you've got it there, because it makes the open note sound like a fretted one rather than being a bit boomier perhaps.
It gives them all the same timbre, doesn't it?
Exactly. And for a bass like this, I think it really, really suits it actually, because with something so, tubby sounding, it can... the timbre across all of the strings can sound a little bit different without that. So I think that's an absolutely genius feature to have on a bass like this.
I think because this is a short scale instrument, it's worth noting as well, it's a short scale instrument, it's got flats, and there are some key differences in terms of the construction which also do affect it. So it's a hollow body, but it's also a set neck. So rather than it having like a bolt-on neck, they use hide glue typically to kind of make that neck join meet the body. So, all of these things do affect the way that not only do they feel, but the way that the instrument responds and the sound overall. And if you look at the pickup placement as well, we can see that they are very forward facing in terms of kind of where they've chosen to go with this instrument sonically. So although we refer to that as the bridge pickup, it's probably ahead of where a P-bass pickup would be normally.
If you look in between the neck and the bridge, it is even further towards the neck. So, but it's even more of that kind of 50s and early 60s sound is pickups being right at the top.
Well, they were looking to replicate an upright, weren't they? So they just wanted a ton of bass response, kind of a quick decay, a lot of low end and fundamental. But the bass at that point, we have to think, wasn't a forward facing instrument in terms of the mix or anything like that. It was very much a supporting instrument role, and they were looking to extract the maximum of the essence of the bass rather than it being like a soloist instrument, which we kind of move over to later on.
Well, speaking of soloist, the controls on these are really worth talking about as well, because we've got 2 different circuits in here, as well as our kind of pickup selection, which they refer to as bass and treble. This one being treble is outlandish, but it's essentially neck and bridge on off for each one, a master tone, a master volume, and then the solo and rhythm circuits. And I believe the differences between these one is the solo is a little hotter, a little more bright to help you poke out a little bit more, for giving you that kind of sound as opposed to sitting in the rhythm.
Do we think that circuit was inherited from the guitar circuitry? Because Hofner also made guitars, and they had I don't know what the single cut's called. It's almost like a Les Paul shape. Is it cavern? Not
Thomann?
Club. That's got the same circuit, hasn't it? So I wonder if it was almost like a part-saving exercise, where it was like, we've already got this made, like, put it in kind of thing.
It very well could have been. And, the terminology, we don't really tend to think of ourselves as solo on rhythm or lead rhythm. So you may well be right in terms of that, but it's just, they're absolutely stunning, and I love that about it. We're going to listen to this now, and as well as, hearing me playing, which is not quite as good as Mr. Matt Parker, naturally, these basses make you play a lot slower and staccato-y. Like I said, they don't want, it's very,
quick to decay.
Quick to decay, that's what you said, which just absolutely then translates into your fingers.
They've also got very thick necks comparatively with, like, say, a jazz bass of the same era. The necks feel really kind of, I would say, kind of almost classical guitar-y, in that they're very chunky with a kind of almost a flat feeling fingerboard. And I think that, again, that plays into that more staccato-y nature with these. Like, it makes you more... it makes you choose your notes with a bit more sincerity, I would say, than you just kind of like shredding or noodling over it, because you don't have that as much fluidity of movement, I would say.
And the width of the neck as well is nearly the same.
Yeah, there's very little taper.
Very little taper on this. It feels great. The one thing before I get playing, we'll say the differences as well between these earlier models and the slightly later ones. You'll notice the logo is different on these compared to the ones where they've got the kind of script logo at the top that they changed into later in the 60s.
On these, am I right in thinking the bridge is a floating bridge? So on the previous two basses, we've had a metal, stamped metal bridge, which is kind of like bolted in place. But the bridges on the Hofners are floating, which means it's very much kind of like a traditional luthier built instrument, like a violin or a double bass or something like that, where the bridge is floating and just sits on the top in position based on string tension, and it transfers energy to the top that way. And it incorporates a lot of wood as well. So the base of the bridge is ebony, I believe, as is the bit that holds the little snippets of fret wire in there. And you change the intonation by just moving these little bits of fret wire into pre-allocated grooves for you. So it's a very interesting and unique bridge system comparatively with Fenders or Gibson, for example. And I definitely think that also it leans into that quicker decay thing, because you're not hitting as much metal, so you're not getting as much resonance.
Yeah. And what I'll say is that Hofner were making instruments, or the Hofner family making instruments before the war, in the late 1800s even. So it's almost like they've definitely inherited some of those very vintage features, and then Fender came along out the gate thinking, maybe we should do it this way, which is modernize things a little bit.
Absolutely.
And other brands kind of caught onto that.
Absolutely.
And we'll see that in one of the basses that we're going to look at next as well. Should we hear this then?
Yeah, let's hear it. So plummy.
It's so plummy.
It's so plummy. You know what I mean? It's got like a real, like, I don't know, real plummy. It's almost like got a kind of a dubbiness to it.
Yeah.
It's, again, super short decay. Certainly played with a pick. And again, the instrument makes you want to play staccato, I think, doesn't it?
100%. And it suits that palm muted with a pick. That's why just instantly I was like, well, let's just do that. It's different to what you demoed before, but it's also just instantly what you want to do. And sometimes I used to think that, that's because you're trying to hide the bass not sounding good. But like just playing it normally with a pick, it sounds good, but with that kind of sound and playing, you almost want it, you want those overtones and you want that raspiness, which this bass doesn't really excel at.
Even when you are playing it kind of without muting it, you get an initial fundamental and then there's almost nothing trailing it.
Well, listen to this slide,
It does sustain, but it sustains with very little overtone. So you kind of just get like a trail off of a fundamental, which is quite an interesting sonic flavor. It's definitely, and again, going back to with the pick, because you can kind of get that attack a little bit harder than potentially with a finger, then it almost kind of leans into you're just hitting that fundamental all the time. And I think that's probably why it leads people to play like that.
Yeah. I mean, before I change the pickups, I'm just going to do a little bit of finger style, but I think these just sound best with a pick.
Yeah,
and doing all that stuff. So let's just do a bit.
The first thing I notice immediately is how much softer and undefined the attack is with fingers. Like the pick almost really brings out the best of the instrument. It's certainly in the room. With fingerstyle, it's almost too round in that like you're not getting that initial bit of note definition. It's just all fundamental. It's just kind of a bit woolly, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And it feels a bit odd to rest my arm here almost. Like it doesn't feel super comfy to me, whereas being able to rest here and with this pickup in this model be moved up is perfect for doing that over this.
I think that tone almost defines that era of British invasion kind of playing as well, doesn't it? Because like, you know, Paul was quite movement heavy, like quite melodic with his bass lines really, and I think part of that was probably he was just trying to keep the instrument going.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a good point, and it's that staccato thing that forces you to play different notes, you know, and get up high as well. That's one thing. This bass sounds just as good up here as it does down here, I think.
Yeah,
I'd say that the money area for these basses is almost up here.
It's after the fifth fret.
Yeah, anything up here. But yeah, let's have a listen to it now. I'm going to turn the treble off, so we're just hearing the neck, so it's going to be a lot even dubbier, I expect. I'm just going to keep it on the pick. The output difference is quite wild when you do that.
It's really noticeable in the room, isn't it? Like that might be something to consider if you're on stage and you're someone who flicks between pickup zones a lot. You probably want a boost pedal, I'd imagine, or at least a volume pedal, so you can kind of like match that. Because like if you're jumping in between even a song, you're going to notice an output drop of probably like 10-15%, something like that.
This would be interesting now if we change it, keep it on that with just the treble pickup and change it between the rhythm and solo just to get an idea about what differences that's kind of giving you on that pickup in particular.
So I'm a big bass 6 fan. And it's very much like what we call the strangle switch or the low cut on that. It takes about a bit of the bottom end out, I think, and kind of just focuses on like mids and beyond.
Yeah. But I think these are such a vibe, and you see them being used in a lot of like modern pop stuff, like Tame Impala. Like Kevin Parker uses one of these exclusively.
Yeah.
And it's instant, that kind of sound.
I think it's because, again, it makes you play a certain way and it really reacts well to a pick playing, but without, I feel like sometimes maybe with like a P or something, you get a lot of attack with a pick, certainly with rounds. And whereas this just kind of almost like enhances the fundamental a little bit more than if you were going to play it with fingers. So it really reacts well. And it also, because it's quite a narrow neck nut width, but very little taper, it almost does lend itself to that kind of like more melodic line because you've got like a very uniform feeling neck. So you can kind of just like box shape stuff around.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it. Love it.
Super cool. I'm mega into these. Hofner, send me more.
Let's check out the next bass.
Yeah.
So now we are in the realm of Gibson. I have a recent affinity for Gibsons, having just purchased a vintage Gibson of my own. And so I definitely wanted to check out this era of Gibson. This is the EB-2, which is kind of a misleading name, I think, because there's only one pickup. This huge, like what's commonly known as like a mudbucker style humbucker right up in the neck, like the Hofner, kind of just right up in there, with this kind of bridge that you'd expect it to be like a floating 3-point bridge type thing, but these are actually kind of more modern in the way that they're set up. And it's actually got the mute system built in. You just pull this in and raise the mute on the string.
It's really interesting, isn't it? They kind of like reverted in some ways to a 3-point, which is, I would say, inferior. Like
Massively.
Yeah, I mean, let's not be around that. It's worse. Because these have got really interesting features as well, like kind of like, I think they're nylon saddles and stuff like that. So like they were clearly, and you know, the mute system, we were just saying this off camera, the mute system is probably the best mute system of this era we've encountered. It's just, it works really well and it's super quick.
Yeah. Super simple. Really not. I've never used one of these before on here. And it's really, really nice. This one, of course, is another short scale. And it's like, bass players were shorter back then, you know, they thought. And then we've just grown up to move into long scale.
I think that was because the short scale gave them more bass fundamental. And at the time, we weren't looking for that super kind of top-endy modern sound.
And like you said, off camera, they're probably trying to imitate an upright a lot of the time. So that kind of short scale kind of is probably an easier transition for those players. Semi-hollow, of course, with the big old F hole in here. Mahogany neck. Look at this thing. The checking on it is beautiful.
It's gorgeous, isn't it?
Yeah. And then we've got there's maple body on this one, isn't it?
Yeah, I think these are laminate maple, double bound, and then, mahogany neck and rosewood board.
Yeah. Absolutely stunning. This is a 1968 model. And it's so true. Like, Gibson was still kind of catering, I think, towards players coming from upright or more jazz focused style. Like all the guitars were kind of like the 335, kind of similar kind of semi-hollow going after that jazz thing. And then it seems like when they moved into the 70s, they went, okay, rock and roll, and really changed tact. Obviously, we'll talk about that more in the next video. But for now, they were still kind of focused on that very much vintage kind of thing. And the most notable player I can think of when I think of one of these is, I think his name's Jeff from Cream, used one of these in the very early days before then moving.
Jack Bruce.
Yes.
Jeff.
Jeff. Same guy, you know, Jack that he went by. So.
He used to use a lot of short scales, but Gibson, I think it was EB-2s, he was pretty prominent usage.
But he started out on one of these before then transitioning to that, which, you know, pickup wise, the difference is then it had a bridge pickup within it. But yeah, this is just super simple. We do have some slightly different electronics on here though.
Yeah.
With what we're going to call like a strangle.
I think strangle switch, yeah.
It's essentially a little button that you push in and out to essentially it cuts rid of the lows. We were saying off camera that it's kind of like the switch that just makes it sound worse.
So I have a theory about this, and I think it's probably a product of its time. So a lot of instruments coming out around this time, kind of in the 60s, you were getting a bit of a spike in kind of like tic-tac spaghetti western style music, and a lot of guitar players were doubling up bass lines on kind of stuff like bass sixes, Dan Electro, what's Dan Electro called their baritone. It's actually a 30-inch scale bass six essentially. So going back to the Hofner we've seen previously, that also had this kind of like low cut. This has its own system as well, and I think it was honestly just to double up lines on sessions for that kind of genre of music, because we see there's a period of time where instruments all kind of seem to feature something very similar, mutes and these kind of like strangle switches, which again kind of like lead us to think that it's probably for these like tic-tac style bass lines that were quite prominent during sessions of the era.
Should we have a listen?
Let's do it.
So this is the bass. It's, like I said, strung with flats, everything on and the mute off.
Below the cap.
Just leave that switch off.
We'll ignore that one, shall we?
Similar to the Hofner, you're getting that bloom really early in the note with these, aren't you?
You are. This, to my ear, sounds certainly in the room. I don't know what it's going to sound like through a DI, but in the room, running through an amp and moves some air, it sounds like a pretty good approximation of an upright. It's obviously not an upright, but you get this kind of like initial sound that is it's got this like really initial kind of like woolly open attack, which really, really does make me think of an upright. And I think that's probably what Gibson were trying to capture with that pickup position and short scale, hollow body. They were very much leaning into that vibe at the time, I think. And it sounds cool. Like, it's a really nice sounding, it sounds very bassy. Definitely has more sustain. And I think in part that's down to the bridge. You know, there's a lot more metal. It's a lot kind of closer. Yeah. It's a lot closer to the body. It's using kind of composites for the saddles. It just seems to kind of resonate a lot better. It sounds really sweet. Like, it sounds like really nice without any harshness. And I think, yeah, melodically it sounds beautiful.
Yeah. That's just my plan, mate.
Yeah. I've always said that.
I've got the mute up now. I'm just going to play some fingerstyle again just to hear what kind of that sounds like in comparison to with it off. Getting quite a lot of like,
yeah.
Okay,
it's pushing those cones a little bit, I think. There's a lot of bottom. And say that's an amp set flat as well. It's like really pushing the bottom on it.
So much bottom end. So I would actually say that this is probably a better bass to be played fairly slow and light. You know, I'm quite heavy handed. Yeah. That's why I'm getting a lot of like big bloom, too much almost on these. Could roll down the volume a little bit. It suits me a lot more when I'm playing it with that dial back a little bit, which I never traditionally touch a volume control. But for this, certainly gives it a little less gain going in for someone that's got heavy-handed sausages like me. Yeah. It's just absolutely stunning. So if you're after a semi-hollow and want something with that kind of real vintage vibe for playing, you know, great acoustically as well, just by itself, then this could be the one for you. So make sure you click the links down in the description to check this out. Like I kind of said a little bit before as well, we are going to be doing some more eras. So the 60s now, the 70s, for Gibson in particular, as a really exciting kind of transition and change in basses. So make sure you go and subscribe to keep an eye out for those videos coming in the near future. Matt, where can people find you on the internet?
So I'm just Matt Parker Bass on everything. So YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. You find me at Matt Parker Bass. And Johnny, where can they find you?
Amazing. You're already watching this video, so make sure you just press subscribe, leave a comment with the basses that you'd like to hear. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, then you can click down in the description and go and do that as well, just at Johnny Dibble. Once again, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.